People will get hit by it, but everybody's going to get hit by this one, so please keep your ears open. I'm aware that Thanksgiving is a rough time of year for many people. The holidays are in general. As much as we like to make it all nice and we love to put up commercials and have all of our places decorated and turkeys are selling and sweet potato pies are going like hotcakes. I mean, even though all that's there, we understand that the holidays are a rough time of year. And they're a rough time of year because we are sold this image that it's supposed to be great and family gets together and there's love and there's caring. But the reality is that the end of the year is no different than the beginning of the year for most of us. And the beginning of the year is no different than the middle of the year. You got problems all year long. So when we think about Thanksgiving and we think about what God wants from us in giving thanks, I thought that I would take this message that God gave me and just spin it from a slightly different angle, looking at thanks even necessarily when we may not want to give thanks. I had the pleasure of maybe about a month, 2 months ago, took a trip down to Mexico. And while we were in Mexico, we went, we came out the airport and we looked for our shuttle. You know, they had little shuttle buses to take you to your various resorts or wherever you're staying. So we come out and it was hot. Oh, it was so hot. So we come out and man, it's hot. And we go and we get our bags and they put our bags on the back of this shuttle. It's kind of like a mini bus. And we get on the mini bus and I'm sitting there. My wife is sitting next to me and she's sitting next to a friend that she hadn't seen in a long time. So the two of them are chatting it up and they're just so happy to see each other. I'm just kind of sitting there riding by myself on the side, looking out the window. I've never been to Mexico. I've never been there. I was curious what the roads were going to look like, what the environment was going to be. So I'm trying to read the signs and I'm trying to just look at the environment. And then we make a sudden left turn. Now, we were on a highway. It was a highway. It doesn't matter where you're from, what part of the world, you know this is a highway. There's concrete, there's signs, there's everything like that. There are lights. And then we turn left. And I've passed it. I've never seen the jungle before in person, but we made the left into the jungle. Now, this not the woods. Most of y'all are familiar with the woods. This was the jungle. It's very different. And we're on a road that's not big enough for 2 cars to pass, and we're just bumping and riding, and there's just dust kicking up. And we see a vehicle coming this way, and I'm trying to figure out how they're going to navigate getting around each other, and we end up riding slow behind a guy on a moped with somebody on the back, and they're just scooting along. And I'm like, all right, you know, taking it all in. And on one of the bumps, I guess I kind of went up high in the seat, and I just caught a quick glance at the dashboard of the driver, right? Just boom, came back down, and I saw something I didn't like. So I kind of sit up on the edge of my seat and look again. Now, some of y'all think I'm being picky, but this bothers me. He had 5 lights on his dashboard, 5 warning lights on his dashboard. Yeah, look, for some of y'all think I'm being picky. You wouldn't ride in somebody's car with 5 lights on the dashboard. 1 light, you know, it better be check engine, and that's it. Like, right? So 5 lights? I'm concerned. I tap my wife. She's having a good time. I tap my wife. Hey, baby, what? He got 5 lights on his dashboard. Baby, it's all right. It's Mexico. That's not an excuse. It's Mexico. There's no pull-off. There are no signs. I don't even know where we're going. There are no street signs. At any given moment, we could get shuffled out of this thing and end up being captured by the cartel. I don't know what's going on. 5 lights. Bothered me the whole way. You don't understand how much it bothered me. My wife makes fun of me because I was really bothered by the fact that this man has 5 warning lights, and you're bringing people from one place to another. He had to drive for about an hour to get to his farthest destination and to get back. But you know what? Even with the 5 lights, we just kept on rolling along. Nothing ever happened. We just rolled. I was nervous the whole time. I'm sweating, but, you know, we just kept on rolling along, and we ultimately got to our destination with no hurt and no harm. We made it despite the lights. Despite the lights. And as we move into Thanksgiving, as we begin to think about all of the things that we are thankful for, one of those things that we are thankful for in our life, whether we phrase it this way or not, is that we are here today despite the lights, the warning lights, all the things that people said were wrong, all the things that people said you got to get checked and this might go wrong, and all the things that you realize anybody else might not have made it through this. We are here despite the lights. We live in a country where people brag about the things that they have done just to live their lifestyle. We live in a country where over the last 10 years, you could have been seen naked or worse to the world 1.7 times a year on average. Who y'all might know who that is, and complain that nobody respects you because you had to sacrifice your reputation for fame. We hear about all the successful people and people that had to step over and people that had to stab in the back just to conquer and be who they're going to be today. I watched a video the other day of a lion crossing a river knowing that there was a crocodile in it, right? All right, comes up to it, he growls at the crocodile, he decides he's gonna cross anyway. Crocodile attacks the lion, lion ganks the lion, gets away from the crocodile and goes ahead and gets to the other side of the river. And we think about those choices, and that's kind of what we put into our mind when we think about people who overcome. People who saw a destination, you said, this is what I'm gonna do, this is what I'm going to achieve, this is what I'm going to conquer. I am going to sacrifice these things, I am going to push hard for these things. But those are choices that people have made to get what they think they want. They could say despite the lights, but that's not really what I'm talking about. They could say despite all these things that could have kept them from success, they are still successful. I'm not saying that. Those aren't the lights I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that you are here, alive and functioning, despite all the signs that you should not have been. I'm not talking about all the things you did to become more successful. I'm talking about the lights, the warning signs that should have stopped you from even being here today. Some of you have had so many lights that you don't have a good or logical reason why you're sitting here right now. Just with the people in this church, you have all seen lights. With the young people and the adults who are sitting in this house, I'm sure there's been the lights of heartache and depression, poverty, no education, molestation, sexual abuse, mental and emotional abuse, mental illness that no one wants to acknowledge, physical illness that no one wants to take care of. You have no parenting, some parenting, bad parenting, no support, no presence, bad examples, trying to figure out how to be a good man or woman because you haven't seen one in your life. Trying to figure out how to be a good partner or be good in a relationship because you didn't have an example for one. You got unreliable families. You got teenage pregnancy. You got abandonment. You got criminal records. You got alcoholism, drug abuse, infidelity, and divorce. But you're here despite the lights. Look, I don't get too loud or demonstrative too often, but when I think about all of the warning lights that have popped up on my life's dashboard, but I still made it this far without a breakdown. I may have had to change a tire every now and then, but it may have been a little bumpy, a little noisy, maybe even a little scary, but I made it this far, then there's nothing I can do but be grateful. And I'm sure if I looked over your shoulder at your life's dashboard and saw how many lights were on your dash, but you're still here, I'd probably shout for you. And that's enough of a sermon for somebody already, because I know that there's a young person or an adult who is thankful because you're sitting here despite the lights. For some of us, even other people can look at your dash and see that you're a miracle. We're thankful because we're still here. As noisy and bumpy and beat up, scratched up, smoking and overheated we are, God blessed us to still keep on rolling along despite the lights. Look, in this text message, Paul was on a ship that he knew was going to go through storms. They went through storms, almost died because of storms, but made it despite the storms. We see when we should be thankful in our own lives, and we can see in this story what we can learn from even our own storms. Look at your neighbor and say, despite the lights. This story has a lot of parts, and I'm going to try to get through it and summarize it as sweet and as short as possible so I don't confuse too many people. Paul, who was a prisoner at the time, is being shipped all over the place. First, he has to stop through Italy. He's eventually supposed to end up speaking to Caesar. So due to the time of year where during that time of year, there were a lot of storms. Paul warns the crew, if they keep going on this trip, there's going to be a disaster and they're going to lose the boat. But they decided to go anyway, and they end up in a storm that has everybody fearing for their life. Paul stops them and lets them know that an angel spoke to him and let him know that they will all make it safe, but they would end up running up on ground. Trying to stay alive, they throw off all their cargo, they throw off all their grain, they throw all the tackle off of the boat, trying to lighten it so that they could find their way to land. And they got to the point they were so stressed they even stopped eating. They end up hitting a sandbar. So the front of the boat is caught in the ground while the waves are literally crushing and ripping apart the back of the boat. In a last-ditch effort, the soldiers get ready to kill the prisoners to make sure that they don't escape. But instead of killing them, the centurion, who liked Paul, ultimately tells them to stop. And they make the command, eventually, whoever can swim, jump overboard and swim to shore. Everybody else floated in on broken pieces from the boat. So let's look at what we can learn from these lights. Point one is season. Point one, season. Verse 9 says that sailing had become dangerous by now because it was after the Jewish Day of Atonement on the Jewish calendar. That could have been anywhere between late September and early October. Other resources on military affairs lets us know that it was dangerous to be on this part of the sea after September 14th, and it was impossible to be on the sea after November 11th. So they were out on the sea in one of the roughest times of the year. This is something that I've mentioned before, and I'll mention again. We all have seasons. There are ups and downs in everybody's life. We know that there is a fall and a spring and that there's a winter and a summer, but you should also know there are storm seasons as well. Those times in your life where it's hard just to get out of bed every morning. Those times when just doing regular things feels like the hardest things that you've ever done in your life. Y'all looking at me crazy. Am I the only person who's ever had storm seasons? Y'all looking at me weird. I don't have a young person who's felt confused or lost and then sad and hurt and then angry and alone. There's nobody here who's had hard times when you don't know if, how, or when you're going to make it out of a certain place that you're in. And once one thing passes, another thing shows up. But look, here's the trick. The soldiers, the sailors, and Paul knew that it was a storm season. They knew it was a storm season, but they had to sail anyway. That was the command. These are experienced seamen. They know the water. So let me just tell you that sometimes you can't get around the storms in your life. You can't navigate to avoid them. Sometimes, many times, you have to go through them even when you don't want to. But these were sailors. They knew that the water was rough, but they still had to keep on doing what they were supposed to do. Young people, adults, I'm going to hit you with this and I'm going to move. Even though you may be going through a storm season, keep on going. That's not a hard message. There was I believe it was Winston Churchill who said, if you have to go through hell, keep going. Sometimes you get so beat down that you don't want to try anymore. Storm seasons lead people to depression and suicide, but a season is just a season. It will pass. Like Paul, you know you have to go through it, so believe that God will bring you out and you stay faithful. That season light on your dashboard should not stop you from continuing to go where you're supposed to go. It should not stop you from being who you're supposed to be. Side note, the same thing goes for the church. Churches go through seasons. Ministries go through seasons. You don't stop because a season shows up. You keep on keeping on even through the storm seasons. Let other people get worried and give up, but you know that God can still get you through this season. Why do you know that? Because he got you through the last one. Despite the season, despite the lights. So point one is what? Good. And point two is storms. Storms. I know an explanation is necessary. You can know what season it is. You can know that things may get rough, but you never know what kind of storm you're going to get. rapper Nicki Minaj, who spends most of her career trying to be provocative, came out with a video in which there was some reference point to Nazis in Germany, and they had, I believe Drake was looking like Pope and all this other kind of stuff. So there was backlash immediately. And she ended up apologizing for it and all that other kind of stuff. And I always kind of find it funny when people who base their career on being provocative are forced to apologize for something, because you know they did it because they were trying to be provocative. You know they were pushing it. They didn't even know where the line was until somebody has to check them. Nicki is one of these situations where she knew she was causing situations, but she didn't know what kind of storm she was going to get. Am I going to get a media storm? That might be a good thing. If I'm going to get racist storm, I don't want that one. So she didn't even know what she was going to get. In Buffalo, New York, 7 feet of snow. They knew snow was coming, but they didn't know what kind of snow they were about to get. 7 feet. 7 feet of snow. I am 5'7 3/4". I'm proud of that 3/4. I normally round it up to 5'8". That's what they told me to do in math, so that's what I stick with, 5'8". 7 feet, not with drift. There are pictures where you can actually see it coming over the land. It looks almost like a sandstorm, only it's all snow. It's clear over here, and you just see snow coming in. They know they're getting a storm. You're in Buffalo, but you didn't know what kind of storm you were about to get. When parents aren't getting along, or when you're arguing all the time, when money isn't right, and when you feel alone, when sickness shows up, you never really know how bad things can get. You know that you're going to be going through a season, but you weren't expecting divorce. You weren't expecting foreclosure or even death or abandonment, etc. But God